a great story to share with the audience today. So I'm going to ask you three questions, Claire. Firstly, why did you want to change? What did you change about yourself? And what did you become in the process?
Okay, so I think a big driver for my personal desire to change was boredom. I look back on my career pathway, leaving university, joining a traditional graduate scheme in the corporate sector,
Very good.
and evolving my career. I worked for three large businesses over my 20s. And looking back, it was a sense of, well, as a boredom challenge, I thrive on fresh challenge. So in that turn brings change, and having an intellectual curiosity to sort of like challenge the status quo and to always learn new things. So going from a graduate to sort of senior, sort of like direct level, by the time I was age 27, I'd achieved that through
Very
changing,
good.
being at different companies and doing different jobs. But I'd worked in sales, marketing, and retail buying. But probably the biggest change for me was having a huge risk away from the security of a very well paid corporate job and taking part in the BBC TV show The Apprentice. And that really was the desire for a challenge to actually compete and see if I was good enough to get taken part in the process, because it is so competitive. And leaving The Apprentice, your life does change when you're in reality TV and you're put into the public eye. But the biggest change for me was that before then, I'd always worked for somebody, and leaving The Apprentice, I wanted to have my own business. And that's what I did. I was an entrepreneur and started my own business and never looked back.
So I'm going to ask you a few questions about The Apprentice, and I am watching, I should say, the current series. Now, I know you appeared in series four, which is some years ago, but I get the impression that what you see on TV for an hour is probably very, very heavily edited, and you don't really get to see what goes on in the background, the interaction between the contestants within the house, for example, as they try to bond. Now, I know when it comes to the boardroom, you've got to speak up for yourself. It's highly competitive, and it's winner takes all nearly attitude. But what is it like being on the Apprentice set, I suppose you could say?
I think what you see as a viewer, so it was on TV this week. You sit down at 9 o'clock, you've had your dinner, a glass of wine or a cup of tea, and you tune in and you watch 60 minutes of entertainment. Well, the 60 minutes of entertainment, in reality, they have about 850 hours footage, which they film per episode. And people forget it is a BAFTA winning TV production. So you are at the mercy of a production team. However, you're not fed lines to say, you're not sort of set up in situations. It is really good TV because you have typically 16 candidates. Everybody's there is really competitive. They're bright, egomaniac. Everybody thinks they're fantastic. I think for me, you see people who are probably quite big fish in small ponds in their own day-to-day lives. All of a sudden they're on a TV show when they are a tiny, tiny little fish in this brand new pond of production and TV. And, behind the scenes, you don't see that you're living with these people 24/7. You're sharing bedrooms, cars, you have no privacy, no internet. You can't just pick up a mobile phone and ring somebody. Everything is restricted. And that is what makes The Apprentice a pressure cooker, the formula. And then you get the tensions mounting, and ultimately I compare it to a big giant pressure cooker. It will blow, and that's when you get the TV moments.
Of course, and dream rises to the top. And I think at this stage it's very hard to identify who is a really strong candidate, because I've seen some good candidates on paper succumb under pressure when they became project managers over the past couple of weeks on The Apprentice show. But more importantly, you were on The Apprentice some years ago, and you had worked in the corporate sector. You got to a reasonably senior position. You were on a good salary. What made you decide, I want to appear on The Apprentice? And did that appearance on The Apprentice series in series four, did that really sharpen your commercial tool set?
I watched The Apprentice since it was on BBC Two, when it was a very, like, now it's one of the BBC's top selling programmes, and it's a very gloss, slick production, and the candidates have got hair and makeup artists. If you rewind to when it started in 2006 or 2005, sorry, it was a completely different beast. And we used to watch it as a family on a Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. It was cult TV. Everybody at work spoke about it. You tune in to the characters, whether you like them or you loathe them. It was new and it was fresh and it was exciting. And I used to sit and scream at the TV that they were useless and that I could do a better job. And you start questioning yourself, thinking, well, could I actually do a better job? Could I actually be picked? Is it really that hard? Does the phone go at 5 o'clock in the morning? What's Alan Sugar really like? And I'm very much a believer you put your money where your mouth is. And I can remember walking into work and I said, before I do anything, I'm going to apply for The Apprentice. And literally those 5 minutes filling in the application form on the BBC website changed my life. I am very competitive. I wanted a challenge. And looking back, I think we're all on a hamster wheel of some sort. Some of us are on a corporate hamster wheel. Some of us are on our entrepreneurial hamster wheel, small business journeys. I was bored of being on somebody else's wheel in the corporate sector, and the sort of entrepreneurial itch, which I now know exists. That's what I was experiencing. I wanted to do something completely different, and I was willing to take that risk and have a go. It never actually entered my head that The Apprentice would be a failure and that I could be sacked after the first episode. I literally went in there thinking, I want to get to the final. That's all I ever said. I wanted to get to the final of The Apprentice, and I did it.
Yeah, good. Well, and well done to you. So along the way in the Apprentice series, series four in your case, what did you learn about commercial skills from Lord Sugar and his team leaders?
Oh, but being in The Apprentice, it was like somebody had literally opened my skull up, pulled out my brain, pulled it around, and then shoved me back out the door. We filmed our series in 5.5 weeks, not the 12 weeks you see on TV. So after 5.5 weeks of no sleep, getting up, working back-to-back days, 20-hour days, I felt that I'd had a completely different insight into the world of business. I'd been in the corporate sector working for 3 very large global businesses, but being on the ground at grassroots level, so to speak, applying the business knowledge I'd learned through the corporate sector into real life situations. And a key skill of business and surviving is adapting that knowledge. I felt that I learned not just from Alan Sugar, but from the other people I was competing with. We were all from quite different backgrounds, and a couple of them had their own businesses. And I thought, well, if they can do it, I'll have a go too. So after the experience, I did start my first business. It was like somebody had taken the blinkers off the world of business and opened up a completely different door to how you can actually make money for yourself.
Yeah, I know what you're saying there because I worked in the multinational sector myself for a number of years. I worked as an accountant, which was kind of somewhere between the back office, but also somewhat front office, customer facing. And when you work in the multinational sector, you have all these other departments around you, like HR, IT, procurement. So you have a safety net there. Your job is very much in the case of an accountant, is to do the monthly accounts, budgeting, forecasting, dealing with statutory accounts and the auditors, but also answering queries on behalf of operational directors and operational general managers, and then facing customers when they want to cut cost, to be honest. But anyway, that's another day's work. But you also have the safety net of other departments around you. When you go out there in the business world, in terms of self-employment, what I've learned is you're not alone the accountant, you're also the salesperson, you're your own HR manager. You've got to look after your own well-being, mental health, exercise, run your own home simultaneously. If you have family, you've got to take care of those people also. So you have to be able to juggle, as Dave Heiner would say, spin a lot of plates at the one time. And I think The Apprentice probably was a great learning for you in that regard. Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. I think that when you're in the corporate sector, you know a lot about little. If you're good at your job, you should know everything about your role, what you're doing, the market. I can remember Alan Sugar pointing at me a couple of times and said, she, as in me, she knows lipstick. I worked in the health and beauty sector. I knew everything about the health and beauty market. But then when you're working for yourself, suddenly you need to know a little about a lot, or, employment and IT and accountancy. But I think that is the whole, for me, the appeal of being an entrepreneur and having your own business, that it's not easy and you've got to learn things quickly. And that's what makes it interesting. If every single day was the same, we'd be back on that monotonous corporate hamster wheel, which I jumped from, and you exited as well.
Of course, and I did see there in the current series of The Apprentice, not to keep talking about The Apprentice, but I do remember there about 4 or 5 weeks ago where one candidate was dismissed by Lord Sugar because that person, I can't remember who they were now, but Lord Sugar got the impression that this person couldn't adapt within a business situation. And he said that, when you're in your own business, you've got to be able to adapt. That person couldn't, and they got dismissed from the current series. So, having successfully competed on The Apprentice, I know you finished runner-up in Series 4. You went out there into the big bad world of self-employment. What did you learn about yourself from that experience?
Oh, when you leave reality TV, I remember Alan Sugar saying to me, "You are not going to know what's happened to your life." And looking back, 14 years ago, social media, we were very protected on social media, whereas now we were removed, we didn't use it, whereas now you're sort of like launched into this gauntlet of social media and everybody's got an opinion about you. And somebody doesn't walk up to you after that experience and give you a book and say, "This is your life, this is what you're now going to do." You've got to very quickly find your own feet. And I listened to some advice from Alan Sugar. He said, don't make any decisions for the next 3 months, because there were so many plates spinning with different work opportunities and interests, that I would say my sort of passion and what I was interested in, I was asked to go speak in a school. And I still remember the email from the head teacher, a school in Blackpool called Unity College, who asked me to go and speak to the girls at the school. I was like, school? Do people actually go into schools and do talks? And that was the moment, what I call the buzz moment, which we all do, hopefully, for our jobs, the bit which drives you to get up every day and to do whatever you're doing in your role. And I can remember doing a talk and thinking, that was really good. I enjoyed it. And then I did a few more talks and things snowballed. And I had an idea, the light bulb moment, to start a business having speakers aimed at schools. So there's lots of speakers who talk to the corporate market, lots of agencies which work with corporate, but nobody was looking at the school sector, not spectre. And I founded a business called School Speakers. Something which I'd learned from Alan Sugar was to keep business simple. What we do, it says it on the tins. I put speakers into schools, colleges, universities. But that was literally what I founded coming out of The Apprentice all those years ago. And here we are sat in my office, and we've got 600 speakers working in schools across the country and across the world. We send people internationally.
So you've made a very successful business out of school speakers, and well done to you. And along that journey, since you started this business, School Speakers, what have you learned about yourself as a person and as an entrepreneur?
I've learned, I think I've always known that I've got great resilience. So one of the my saving speeches in The Apprentice to Alan Sugar, when I thought he was about to fire me, was that when business is good, it's great, but when it's tough, you want somebody like me, no matter how bad my day's been, I'll come back the next morning with a cup of Yorkshire tea, ready to go again. I am incredibly resilient. I always say, as long as nobody's died, there is a solution. It might cost you time or money, but we can get things fixed. Something which people talk about nowadays, like networking. I never consciously networked, but I've always really enjoyed meeting new people, connecting to people, going to events, not realizing that was networking. But my business is based off people. That's my commodity. So something which I really enjoy doing is actually become my business. I'm a good networker. And I think you've just got to it's all about your attitude as an entrepreneur. You've got to be positive. It's not every day is easy. Like I said, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But You've just got to have a really good positive attitude and a good sense of humour on those days when it is a bit tricky, to remember why you're doing it and keep focused.
It's a very good advice for anyone to be entrepreneur. I know what you're saying there, that when you're working for yourself, it's very easy to become discouraged when you have a bad day and to start thinking about giving up. But what I find is by keeping a gratitude journal, for example, and I do that every day, even if I had a bad day, if I can put down in that gratitude journal one thing I'm grateful for each day, that's success to me because at least you're building momentum over time. And I do think that the most successful businesses are built slowly and surely over time. You don't go for the big bang approach because it's very easy to get burnt out in that scenario. And also, you have to be able to take on board people's feedback. Now, if somebody says to you, Claire, I think your idea isn't really workable, you have to thank them for that feedback and come up with a better solution and ask them for some constructive feedback as to how you can improve your business idea. Because what I found is that, feedback is the food of champions. And the people who take on board feedback, they're the people who actually succeed in the longer term. What's your experience in that regard?
Well, I'm sort of agreeing with you as you're talking, because I think programs like the Apprentice and Dragon's Den have been fantastic for inspiring lots of people to start businesses, particularly the younger generation. But there is a mentality that you wake up one morning, you say you're going to start a business, you click, buy a phone, you turn on a computer, and the next day you're Alan Sugar. As we know, the reality is it takes, I would say, the first 2 years of running a business, you are slogging away. You're probably reinvesting all the sales you have into building that business. It is a long slog. I started my business in 2009, and it took me 6 years until we were winning awards and being recognised in the industry. It doesn't happen overnight. So I'm really glad that you said that. And my mind's gone blank. What was the other point you said?
Just you have to, take the good with the bad, I suppose you could say, and also don't allow yourself to become demotivated by having bad days. You have to think into the long
Yeah,
term.
absolutely. And I think you do have days where it's frustrating and people can let you down or things don't go the way you want it to. I nearly every day really appreciate I don't have to commute. I don't have to sit in loads of traffic to go to work. After living in London for 10 years, so every single day when I'm coming to work, I'm glad that I've got a nice drive in the country. I can easily park, and I'm in charge of my own hours, my own working schedule. I'm on my own hamster wheel, so to speak. I've got that freedom, and that freedom to me is absolutely priceless.
Of course, and I know from experience working in the multinational sector that often when you get a new managing director, say in country or at an EMEA level, as a CEO, for example, they want to bring their ideas to the fore, and you always find this continuous change and delayering of
Mm.
staff along the way, or new people are brought in to freshen up ideas. So the multinational sector, although it has many advantages, it's not forever and doesn't last forever for a lot of people. You could find yourself being made redundant after 3, 6, 9, 10, 12 years.
Mm.
Not a job for life anymore. But I think when you get out there and start your own business, and more importantly, that you find your own purpose, you can build a very successful business over time. But you have to, as you say, keep your head down, get out there, engage with people, get to know people and their issues, and then design uh, solutions to those problems for people. That's what the nuts and bolts of a successful business is. I think it's providing solutions to other people that are
Yeah.
realistic. Yeah.
Yeah, and what you said about feedback is so important, because I think probably one of the biggest failings for lots of entrepreneurs I know is they are very passionate about their businesses. They tend to be quite excitable people. They think they've got the best business idea ever. However, if you talk to your target market, which you need to do your market research. You need to ask them, you need to listen and take on board what that feedback is. Because if your customer is saying, I don't like the business, I don't like the item, I don't like the service because of whatever reason, are absolutely nothing without your customers. You might think you've got the best idea, but if no one's actually going to engage with it or buy it, you're not going to have a business. For school speakers, every single time we run an event, after the event, we follow up and ask for feedback about how it went, if there's anything constructive, because as a business, we want to be the best. We want to bring our A game. We want to have the best service and the best speakers. And without that feedback, you can't evolve. You've got to listen to what your customer is telling you. The customer is absolutely king. No customers, you've got no business.
True, very true. I agree with that. So you've built up school speakers since 2009. You now have 600 speakers on your books, and you're predominantly in the UK, but you're also expanding into Europe and the US. Where would you like to see school speakers going over the next couple of years?
Well, school speakers, we've had, I mean, from where we've started, the idea in which I had in my head with connecting with 54 speakers, going back to that networking, the people who are new to now, we've got 600 speakers. We do student talks. We've diversified. Now we do staff talks. We do conference speakers. COVID obviously shook up our industry hugely by actually shutting the industry, but then opening a completely new door of online talks and business, which means that I can send speakers all across the world, which is an avenue which we are working more and more on, which is exciting. Having that diversity of talking to people across the globe on the probably really quite similar issues which we're experiencing. I've been approached by a number of government agencies who would like to work with school speakers, but I don't ever want to become a sort of like a government institution, so to speak. I like the fact that school speakers is a private business and it's privately operated, and I think that is how we've kept control and provided a really good service out to our schools. So for the future, I think expanding it into the global market more, and also looking more at online content, which we thought that might not disappear after COVID, but I think it is a channel of business which is definitely here to stay.
Yeah. And on a personal front, I know you want to grow school speakers into a global business. Would you be the type of person who would decide I can let go of some of the day-to-day work and I'm going to take a more strategic, role within the business to grow it on the global stage, and avoid being too hands-on? Do you see yourself going down that direction?
I've been approached in the past we've had various offers for people to acquire school speakers and for me to work in a strategic role. For the time being, I really enjoy the sort of buzz of my day-to-day work of connecting with the various schools and institutions which we work with and doing that groundwork. I think the time might come where I would like to probably step back maybe in 5 years and move maybe into something more political. But for the time being, I do like the sort of nitty-gritty day-to-day of dealing with schools and being hands-on with the business.
So this has been a very interesting conversation today, Claire. And three takeaways I take from today's conversation are, firstly, is to be resilient in business. And you're a great example of that, because what you learned from the Apprentice appearance many years ago in season 4 was that you have to think on your feet. You have to be able to spin many plates at the same time, and you have to be able to adapt to business very quickly. You also talked today about the fact that the customer is king. That's a second takeaway from me, is always ask for feedback from your customers, because ultimately they will tell you what you're doing well and also identify areas for you that you need to improve on. And that feedback is golden. Mm-hmm. And I also talked today about the fact that, and the third takeaway for me is, everybody has their good days, everybody has their bad days, but you must focus on what's important to you and think about the long term. Don't become frustrated because you have a bad day, and don't give up. You've got to get up the next day, as you say, have a cup of tea and come back to the table with a fresh momentum and fresh ideas as to how you can improve. So this has been a great conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience before I let you go?
I think just sort of briefly touching on about having bad days. I almost feel that we've entered a world where it's not good to have bad days, or it's abnormal to have bad days. It is completely and utterly normal life to have frustrating days and have bad days. And I think a key success for me is when I know that I'm becoming a little bit tired or run down or lacking energy. My energy bucket is sort of running low, so to speak. I know to red card myself. I sort of remove myself for half a day or a day, switch off my phone and fill my bucket back up in terms of, I don't know, going for a walk, going to the cinema, riding a horse, and being able to sort of manage to avoid that sort of downward spiral and not enjoying work, making sure that I'm the best what I can be in the business by managing the good days and the bad days, so to speak.
And I think before I let you go here, Claire, I'd like to say to the audience that if you just take the example of Claire here today, what you exude is passion about your business and also great energy. And I think they are really, really important in any business setup, particularly for people who are in self-employment, that you come across as passionate to your customers and to your prospects, that you're there to help them. This has been a fantastic conversation. So, Claire, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to have this great conversation today on behalf of the audience.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. Thank you.